product manager for Cognos Insight, which is a little bit different. Everyone confuses them. Product managers are sort of focused more on the product, not a specific schedule. As it happens, what I am going to share with you today is based on a very specific schedule. It's based on a particular release. And it's really all of what's new with Cognos Insight 10.2.2. So this was a release we had in May, so many of you will probably not have seen it yet. If anyone was able to join us at our Vision conference in Orlando in May, which was a great time, you might have got to see a bit. Hopefully, even if you have, I'll be showing you something a little bit new today. I like to change it up as much as possible. Don't waste a whole lot of time introducing myself. If you get bored listening to me, you're more than welcome to read my life story at left. You'll also see that my contact information is at bottom left. So if you do have questions that we don't get to today, feel free to reach out. I can't promise I'll get back to you in the same day, but I will certainly get back to you. So what I'm going to try to cover now in 30 minutes is what I think is new and great about 10.2.2 that I think you'll be interested in. For me, as a product manager, it's probably the biggest release we've ever had of Cognos Insight. We've really opened up a ton of capabilities that I'm really excited about. I'm hoping that you guys will be excited about it as well. Now, what I'm going to take you through is quite a bit of what's new. I recognize, though, that there could be lots of people on the phone who don't have any idea what Cognos Insight is. So, for those folks, I'm going to give you a very quick rundown of some of the things that you might not know about Cognos Insight and why it would be important to you. And for those of you who already well understand, please feel free again to read my life story at left if you're bored. So Cognos Insight is what you're looking at right here on your screen. You should be able to see this now. It's not PowerPoint. I do like to present in Cognos Insight because it keeps things really smoothly flowing, and it doesn't look too bad either, as far as I'm concerned. So we'll step through a lot of things. We'll look at what's easier about it, what's sexier about it, what's more engaging, and why it's so powerful now. This is the thing that I'm really excited to show you. But before I get to that, a couple of things about Cognos Insight. So it's a rich client application, like I said. You're looking at it here. Install takes, for most people, usually about 2 minutes at most. You can have it installed. It's an MSI. If your IT folks are particularly friendly or particularly draconian, they can push that install to your desktop very easily as well and manage it that way. So pretty standard technology to install and start to work on things completely independently if you like. So that's what makes it particularly unique as compared with all of the products that you've probably come to know and love from Cognos, is that we don't need a server install at all. You install Cognos Insight and get it for free, not for commercial use. If you like playing fantasy football, you can do that for free at least. But you can work completely independently. You don't have to wait for your IT team or anyone else to set up a server. This will work completely standalone. In fact, even if you're using it in conjunction with perhaps a TM1 server that you're using for planning, you can also take data offline with Cognos Insight to work on it. So you can get on a plane, complete your contribution, and then submit it when you get back into the office. So lots of capability to work completely standalone. So I mentioned that it was free. It's free when it's not for commercial use. So if you want to use it to track your progress on a diet, as I did last summer, that's totally free. Go right ahead. If you're using it as part of your business, perhaps to manage a capital expenditure process or do some profitability analysis, you need to send to IBM $530 US. Alternatively, you can meet me out back with a bottle of good scotch. That works too. No, I really can't do that. But it's very cheap. So $530 US gives you the right to use that in your business and do whatever you want with it. You see some of what I've done with it here. It makes pretty dashboards. That's not what it's for. That's just a capability of Cognos Insight. For me, Cognos Insight is as much a dashboarding tool as Excel is. That's one thing you might do with Excel. This is one thing that you might do with Cognos Insight. We have a lot more capability than that. And even in just touching on what's new today, I'm hoping you'll see a lot of that. one last note on the pricing. Most of the folks in this call, I've mentioned the standard edition price, $530 US. You're probably mostly all entitled to use it already if you have TM1, if you're a contributor to TM1, if you're an advanced business author as part of our Cognos 10 role, if you're a modeler. Most of those roles already include an entitlement of Cognos Insight. We give it to you for free just to show you how much we love you. You can work, like I said, standalone. You can also prototype models. I'm going to show you some of that today. And you can contribute back to a central TM1 model that you already have. So I've got a bet with Taya, one of the other presenters, that I won't go over my allotted 30 minutes, or she'll owe me a beer. So with that in mind, let's get started right away. And we'll take a look at why it's easier. So a lot of folks complained fairly in the beginning about one particular missing feature that made it a lot more difficult to learn Cognos Insight. We're in our third year now, starting now of development, and folks have complained for some time about one missing feature that you see here that's incredibly important and powerful for ease of use. In fact, I'm trying to change our tagline to it's so easy even an executive can use it, but for some reason no one will approve that tagline. So I'll show you why undo and redo makes it easy. You probably know it, and you probably know how this works, but if I were to come into a dashboard, say as an executive or anyone else, where I'm looking at my revenue performance in this tree map. I love my tree map, it's really pretty. And I see that San Diego is doing particularly well, and I drill on San Diego, and then I slice to see what markets are doing well in San Diego. And I think that's interesting, but now I want to see another region. Well, really clever people would know that they could just click here and look at that in San Jose or how that compares in Boston. People who aren't necessarily that clever can click that undo button, go back and look at San Jose. Then they can slice on items, decide they want to look at this particular product and how that breaks down across lines. Well, they're all dishwashers, but I can just step right back and forward using undo and redo to move seamlessly through that navigation process. Now, it isn't just navigation that we cover with this capability, so I'll show you a few things around it that are also pretty important. For example, if I've got a lovely filter over here called measures that someone's put on this dashboard for me, I also want to be able to look at a particular market. So let me drag that out and look at that. That was really hard. I might have totally screwed that up, so I can click undo and just remove that very easily, rather than knowing that I have to right-click here and remove it. So just a way to make it much easier for people to move through a workspace and do all of the activities around authoring and navigation that might be worth undoing because we've made some sort of schoolboy error in that. Now, in addition, what we always supported is still there. If I've done some data entry, I can undo that as well, and that happens all in line with my other changes. So for example, if I flip this to say I want to see the cross tab of this, I'm going to zero suppress it so I get some more numbers, and I say I'm forecasting my revenue for all of these guys to go up by 10%, and I do some data entry here, that gets part of that same undo stack. So I can undo my data change, my zero suppression, my chart, everything, and just step back through everything that I've done. I won't say any more about that. You guys probably already know how to use undo and redo. So we don't have to talk about it a lot, but it's really powerful. It makes it much easier to navigate and author a dashboard. So why do I think it's sexier? I always thought it was very sexy. What have we done to improve that? Number one thing I think is probably conditional formatting. Long-standing requests, real table stakes capability to produce a nice dashboard. Not always necessary in a planning application, but very useful in one. If I'm contributing to TM1 as part of a plan, it's really nice when I can highlight for those contributors when their contribution has exceeded a particular threshold. For reviewers, calling out specific line item as what we call dynamic text is also useful. So I'll show you a couple of examples of how this works. you're looking here at a very simple set of data, revenue, cost, quantity across various product lines and dates and that sort of thing, where I've taken out a couple of those explore point filters you saw me use previously, and now I can start filtering those. And what you're seeing here, of course, is our conditional formats and our dynamic text are reacting to those changes. So we're filtering this data to look at just departments, or just our department market or a rental market. And we're also seeing our conditional format applied to that and our revenue and cost updating to reflect those changes. So if I wanted to, for example, if I were a product manager interested in a specific product, like this looks like a microwave, I can filter on that, and that's going to update all of my values here. So easier for me to build a much prettier dashboard using those dynamic values. They're just rich text. I can decorate them any way I like. And for fun, let's do that now. We'll create one here for quantity. And I'm going to do this based on the total of all of my outlets and quantity. So this dynamic value that I'm going to create here, we make it really big and ugly when you start, just so you can see it. This dynamic value, I'm going to label as quantity, and then I'm going to format that so that it looks like my other ones. We'll make it a really outrageous pink. And format that, locate it where I want, and now that's going to react as well to my filters. Now it's important to note about this, you recall when I created that, I right-clicked on this cell, again, for quantity and the total of all of my outlets. What that means is that that dynamic value is always going to be fixed to total of outlet and quantity. What is going to change are any of the items that are in the context, that describe the context of this. So for example, which market I'm looking at, if it's the builder market or the furniture market.
How are you?
Which product line I'm looking at.
Good.
And that sort of thing. So those
you're on the
webinar? As I make changes. But my quantity
okay, I was wondering
outlet are going to be fixed.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was
if
you.
I did also want to filter on
because Kelly's like, oh, I just talked to her.
use
She's on. And I'm like, oh, I don't see her. So I just figured I'd just call you and make sure when I need to transfer it over to you that I pick the right one.
Excuse me. Now we'll take a look at conditional formatting. What you're actually seeing in this grid that I've shown are two types of formatting, really. One of them is conditional based on values. The other is conditional, but only based on elements.
Yep, I see. I see which one you are. Yep. Okay. No, I just that way I'll just know which one to pass it to.
So let me show you how
do you want me to go ahead and run the slides?
And we'll look for anything with an
exceedingly
high cost, and we can make that red.
I don't think I got the message.
Style on my
I haven't checked.
I'll create a new conditional style using cost. And then all I have to do is say what I want that cost to be. So anything over
let me go
500,000.
So
we'll give you some default ones here as well, so you can just choose to say that's really
slide 3. So balanced scorecard.org.
Particular about it, you can determine your own background colors, foreground colors, so your font color, as well as the font size.
That should be good. Okay, so I'll run through those and just kind of, I don't know if you want to.
Particularly high here.
I'll try and
much larger. Again, I can make that screen red in the background.
Oh, I can flip through them. That's fine. I just give me a high sign when you want me to flip. I'll try and
exceedingly high cost. So useful in planning
if not, and then that way, once you're done, you're going to introduce Taya, right?
Where we've exceeded a particular threshold.
Hello?
You can add any number of these, perhaps if it was less than 200.
Yeah, so you're going to introduce her when you get to that slide, I'm guessing. And then after that, I will make sure that she's unmuted and we can talk.
Very easy to add these.
Cool.
This one I've added
Talk
here,
to you later.
the cost one, is one using the values in the cell. So you'll see, of course, it's resized to show those exceedingly high costs. What you'll notice as well here, and I always recommend this to people, because it's not bounded by anywhere in the hierarchy, I always tend to show these as a flat list. I show them from the very bottom, so I'll show a flat list, and I'll also remove totals. So with my totals removed, now I've got everything at roughly the same scale of values, and I don't have to worry about the hierarchies. I'll show those again, just so we can see how I've created the summary level highlights here for California, New York, and Massachusetts. So that's a conditional style that I've created on the edge of the grid, so my column and row headers. And if I edit this one, you'll see this is pretty straightforward. I choose how I want to select those values, so I could be looking for strings. So for example, highlight all of those products that start with, A3 or something like that, what they contain or start with, all the standard criteria for matching items. Or I could just select values. So in this case, here are all the members of that dimension. Here are all my outlets. And let me choose those. Of course, these are all the lowest level ones. So I wanted to add San Diego, for example, to this criteria. I just add that over here. And now San Diego would also be highlighted for me, just like my total level, California, New York, and Massachusetts. So the condition is one just based on what's in the rows or columns. So, useful capabilities, I think, for both the planning context, if I'm contributing to a central TM1 application, the dashboard context, where I want to build something really pretty to share with my department, my team, my nearest executive, anyone like that who I want to show and get engaged with a particular set of data. That's our dynamic text and conditional formatting. Talk about why else it's more engaging. This is something that will probably most likely resonate with folks who've used Cognos Insight in the past and tried to build a particularly large or interesting dashboard where you've got a whole lot of widgets and a whole lot of filters, and you want to control how those filters and the data responds to that. So for example, here I have a trend chart that's showing me over time, in fact, my revenue and cost. That's really silly. I'll just filter that on revenue. And then I've also got a pie chart up here showing revenue. Now, it might be that I want these to listen to the same value. I want a pie chart showing cost, and I want a trend showing cost. But very often, I want to be explicit about having those work differently, not listen to each other, as we would say. Up here, I've got a breakdown in my pie chart, possibly the ugliest and worst chart type of all, but in this donut chart that I've got here, I'm showing the breakdown by market. Now, if I were to filter that and it were to listen and just show builders, that's not particularly useful to me anymore. I need to actually have these filters not listen. I want to see my trend to show just my furniture market, for example, but don't update this chart. I only want that one to update when I look at the breakdown by outlet, which outlet I'm looking at. So for this synchronization capability, what we've done is create groups. So we have a whole new area here, which hopefully you'll be able to see in a second here, called synchronization. That's in my drawer control, and where I've got my data. Also, we now have workspace added. Synchronization in our typical toolbox of objects that you can throw in your dashboard. In this synchronization area, you'll see that market right now is sitting at the very top. So it's broadcasting to all of the groups that I have here. I created one I called proportion, created one I called trend. So what I want to do with market is I only want it to affect my trend. I'm going to move that into my trend group, and now when I filter on market, the only thing that's going to be updated is my trend chart, my chart in this group. It's not going to broadcast that to its sister group over here for proportion, where I've got my donut chart. So I got lots of exercises for you to show this in a bit more detail. What you'll see here, of course, too, I want to add our outlet filter is still broadcasting to everybody on this particular tab. If I wanted to, I could also have that broadcast to all of the tabs in this workspace. So if I go back home, and we see that we've got 5 tabs in this workspace, I could have a single widget control all of those. But in this case, I've not done that. So that's our new synchronization capability. Much richer model. Previously, you'd only been able to turn things on or off and not be specific or put things into groups that listen to each other. And all of that synchronization capability is equally supported when you publish this to Cognos Workspace. We haven't talked about that, but if you use Cognos Insight to publish to Cognos 10 and TM1 to create content there, that synchronization model will work equally well there. So we support all of that. That's true also for our dynamic values and our conditional formatting. All of those things will be in parity with what you see in your browser when you're opening it with Cognos Workspace. So, trying to stay in time, we'll move on to why it's so powerful now. It's hard to describe the level of capability that we've added by now allowing people to take their imported data and use the full power of the TM1 calculation engine to calculate and evaluate, all sorts of models. What I'm going to do, though, we exposed rules previously, so you'd have seen the ability to write TM1 rules if you're familiar with TM1 rules with the script editor. That was there as a capability, but for a lot of users, it's a pretty significant training uplift to get to the point where you can write TM1 rules. So what we did, quite shamelessly, was steal from Performance Modeler a new way of defining the application logic of an Insight workspace or a central TM1 server. So I'm going to show you how we do that now. Rather than look at the screen caps, I'm going to create a new Insight workspace, and we're going to build something completely from scratch so you can see how we do this. And this will hopefully highlight as well for folks who've not used or seen Insight before what that looks like. So I'll give it a second. I'll locate my data. What I'm going to show you in terms of data is some that we've got some workshops for so that you can do yourself as well. I'll use this time to point out that you probably want to make your way to the analytics zone. I'll give you the link at the end to find these, or you can talk to your friendly folks at Lodestar, who I think would be happy to help you with some of these workshops. But it'll give you a chance to get your hands on what the modeling experience is like in Cognos Insight now. If anyone on the call previously used Enterprise Planning Analyst to build a model, be very familiar with the paradigms and the approach to creating a model. The only thing I'd say is that we've made it even better than it was in that time. So, without further ado, here's a blank Cognos Insight workspace. So nothing added. I've got the option now to create a new one. The way I do that, certainly for this demo, is to just bring some data in. So for example, I'm going to bring some population data. I can get my data from many different places. I could be pulling it out of Cognos 10. I could be taking it from a database through ODBC, from SPSS, or to keep it simple in this case, just a simple text file, CSV file, that I took from data.un.org. Really fun place to get data. Lots of interesting information there. One of the things you'll find there is population data, and that's what you're looking at right now. Now, I dragged and dropped that CSV file into Cognos Insight, and we did a whole bunch of stuff with that. We created a process that will automatically import from that same source. All I have to do is right-click that process and run it, or I could edit it if I want to point it to a new location. I also created a set of dimensions and the cube. Simply by dragging and dropping the data, we've got what is, in fact, a TM1 cube. You won't see that. You don't know that. You've just installed Cognos Insight. That's just what we use under the covers to store the data and create the expression logic and all the views that you see here. What I'm going to do now is start playing with that a little bit, because it also gave me a grid up here and a chart in a split view. So I can immediately see some interesting things here, like China having a little better than $1.3 billion. I'm going to relabel it so that I can see that, because this data, as I got it, was scaled in thousands. So I'll just rename that here. So there's my population. Also going to adjust it. I know that at the time we got this data, we'll take a look at our years to see when that was, just 2007, so 1 year of data. But I know that it's gone up since then,
So let me make that clear. We're at over 7 billion people in the world. Because we're scaled to thousands, I'll just use 7 million as my shortcut. You see that there. Now we have, assuming that each country has grown at roughly the same rate, we've got something that represents roughly how many people I'd expect to find in the various countries. Now I'm going to do something else. So I'll hide our account here. And I'll look at this in a tree map just because I love my tree map. And we see, of course, the big hitters, China and India, followed by the United States, that are the highest population. Tree map, again, a great way to see the proportion of values. The way that we put labels on for this makes it really nice to see and easy to understand. The next thing I'm going to do, though, is go grab some more data and use it in this cube. So the data I'm going to get here is, what's fun? Let's do healthcare spending, my total healthcare spend. I don't know if we'll have time to get through all of these data sources, but I'll throw this one in as well. And this is, you'll see here from the count that we add, this data is actually for multiple years. So in fact, we've got 2006 here. We've also got 2000. Let me take that and look at my years here. So we've got 2000. We have no data for 2007 related to, in this cube, this is our total healthcare spending by country. We don't have any data for 2007. That might be interesting and important later, but I can still use this data in my population cube. If I wanted to know, say, for example, how much a country was spending, I would take the per capita number, per person number for healthcare spending, and multiply that by the population. So let's do that now. So I'm going to add a column here. I'm just clicking Insert to add a column, and this column is going to be for healthcare spending. And now I'm going to get values for that. I'm also going to fix my tree map because I don't like how it looks. I actually don't want to color by anything. We'll just leave it categorical. And now I'll get my healthcare spending numbers. I'm going to do that with a cube calculation. This is the capability that we've added in 10.2.2 that I think is so powerful, because it allows me to create the sort of expressions that I might otherwise create in a spreadsheet, but in a much more maintainable way and using the full power of the TM1 calculation engine to support that. So here's our expression editor, and I'll just give you a couple of highlights of the sort of things that we can do with it. One of the things we can do is scope the expression. So that means set where the calculation of the expression applies in these views. So what you're used to probably from the spreadsheet approach is that the scope of a calculation is a single cell. It's always a single cell. Even if you drag that calculation, use it in a whole bunch of cells, it's specific to that individual cell, which can be useful sometimes, but it can be really difficult to maintain. Right? It's very hard to keep all of those expressions working. When data gets updated, you add a new cost center, I have to copy the expression, all that sort of thing. What we do is allow you to get specific. So, for example, I might only want this to apply to 2007, but we start from a high level and say, no, this is healthcare spending. It's that column as it relates to everything. We don't calculate that different for a particular country. We would start by saying, this is my spending, but only for Afghanistan, and then copy and paste that to Albania and Algeria and Andorra and so on. We don't worry about any of that. This is, in fact, just my healthcare spending. In fact, it's going to be the same for all years. So I'm only going to scope this for healthcare spending. And then I'm going to link my data. So remember, we've got two cubes here. One set of data I imported had population. The other was per capita spending. Let's go get that per capita spending data. So I do that with a link. So I'm creating a link. Again, anyone who's used Cognos Planning Analyst in the past will be very familiar with this paradigm for linking data from one object to another, one cube to another.
Hey Eric, Mike Bernache giving you a call.
You'll see that because both of these cubes use country.
Let me know if you got that link. I sent it to both addresses, and it actually just copied and pasted it in the email you sent me just a minute or two ago. So hopefully it's getting to you. I'm not sure why is getting hung up.
So hopefully
you haven't. Otherwise, let me know.
Recall,
thanks.
One of the things we saw in the beginning was that I actually didn't have any data for healthcare spending for 2007. So I'm going to do something really crazy here. I'm going to match 2006, which is my most recent year, to 2007, because that's how I want to use that data. And then what I want, of course, is to move my value from this healthcare spending cube over here to my healthcare spending column. Now, this link is very dynamic. If I add another country or area, it's not going to change how this expression works. I can add all kinds of countries or areas. If I wanted to change my year, I would have to update it. But anything else I add is not going to be impacted. If you think about how you might have joined these two sets of data, were you in a spreadsheet, it looks a lot easier to maintain as you start adding anything to it. So the idea here is to build really maintainable expressions so that you build them once and you don't have to continually work on them every week. So here I've created my link for spending. One other tricky little bit to learn, how do we want the spending to sum? So it might be that I want that to just go into the lowest level items, so the regions of Afghanistan, Albania, and so on for a particular year. But I often have to think about how I want that to sum up. Do I want that to be an average at the top level? Am I happy for it to be a sum? Do I want to calculate the total level differently? Something we often do when we create a version for plan or actual, we often calculate those differently as well, or at the aggregate level. In this case, I should be fine to just link in my spending as long as I calculate both the top and bottom the same. Okay. And now we'll see our healthcare spending, again, on a per capita basis for Afghanistan, Albania, and so on. Not a lot of money spent on healthcare in Afghanistan. Doesn't look like. Now I'm going to create one more expression because, again, the data we linked in was per capita, and if I'm interested in how much people are spending in total, that it makes sense to me at least that that should be my population times my healthcare spending. So I'll create one more calculation for total spend, not per capita, and we'll do that by taking our population and multiplying that by healthcare spending. So you'll see here in the expression that it's very easy for me to grab one of my either columns, members of one of my dimensions, drag those in, and create expressions not unlike I might have created anyway in Excel or anything like that. So, okay. And there's my total spend. That number's not wrong. It looks astronomical, especially when you consider that that's in thousands. So let's modify that so we see it. But that's in fact what we spend on healthcare globally. Big difference in some of the countries. Let's take a look at it by filtering my tree map on it. Anyone surprised by that result? When you take the population third highest with one of the higher spendings per person, then you get some really astronomical healthcare spending numbers. For lots of fun, you can actually get this. This workshop is on the analytics zone, and it includes life expectancy data, which I consider to be a measure of the value of your spend. If you're living longer, that's probably your healthcare dollars paying off. If you're not, then you might ask where your money's going. But you can have loads of fun with that on your own. The data comes from data.un.org. You can get it yourself if you don't trust my source. I did clean the file a little bit. There was a footer in the file that looked a bit silly when we imported it, so I cleaned that out. But feel free to go grab that data. And now, I'll very briefly step back to my presentation to talk about some of the other things that we've added before I finish on time. So, a couple of things I've mentioned that Cognos Insight can be used to contribute to TM1. Some of you may use contributor for that now, you may use perspectives for that, you may use TM1 Web. Whatever you use today for contributing to TM1, I want to make you aware you can also use Cognos Insight. Either in our connected mode, where you're just pointing at data on the server, or you can use a distributed mode if you want to let your users take the data offline, work completely locally. I can tell you from plenty of personal experience, there really is nothing faster than having that data locally when you're working offline or in distributed mode. If you're halfway around the world from your TM1 server, it's really powerful, fast experience. What we've added for those contributors to TM1 and or reviewers of a TM1 application is the ability to have multiple workspaces to look at. So my long history with planning applications has convinced me many times over that reviewers take a very different view of the world than contributors. Why not give them a different workspace as well? So if they want to look at pretty tree maps like I've shown you guys to see proportions easily and not lots of grids of numbers, then you can give them that. You can offer at will at either the contributor level or the reviewer level and create that experience exactly as you'd like for the users. You can also, big hitter for us, the ability to print your workspace. So everything I've created here, I can just send that to the printer. I can also send it to a PDF, which I'll probably do so that you guys are able to get that. I may stick that on the analytics zone so everyone can get it. I know I didn't send any slides to share stuff. This will, the PDF will hopefully take place of that. But we can dump the whole workspace out to PDF or printable. You can also, small improvement but important one, if I've got an average, I'm sometimes very interested in averages as much as I am in sums, but I love writing back data. We can also spread from calculated consolidation rates. So if I were to show you that here in my other example, I'm pretty sure I had something here that was an average that we're looking at. Maybe, there's still a little bit was an average, so let's see. No, not so much. Maybe my life expectancy. That's the average. I didn't include life expectancy. That's why I don't have an average. In any case, if I were to create an average here, I'll change my roll up to be an average. We also have time roll ups, by the way. If I were to change this guy to be an average, say, what do we got? My value here, make that an average. I could still spread on that data. So, for example, if I don't want this to be 613, I can spread on that, do an equal spread, and we'll just add 10 to that. Suddenly we're going to start spending more money on healthcare globally, equally, everywhere. I can do that very easily from my spread menu here. All on aggregations or non-aggregations. We can do that now. And minor point, but if anybody struggles to deal with older data sources that don't have 64-bit drivers, especially for functional insight today, using it to get at data that's stored in some old old access driver or something like that they need to use to get at it. Previously, it had to install a 32-bit version of Cognos Insight, not the 64-bit version, to get at that older data. We solved that, and now you can use the 64-bit version of Insight to get at even those old data sources. So, a small improvement, but an important one for a lot of folks who are in modern times and have 64-bit machines. So, that is the bulk of what I had to show you, I think, in exactly 30 minutes. So someone sitting across from me leaves me a beer. If there are any questions, please throw them in the chat, and I'll either stay on and answer those later, or I'll answer you in the chat. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Trevor. I appreciate it. Great, great presentation. If I may, can I ask a question?
Sure.
You had talked about TM1, connecting to TM1, and obviously you showed connecting to like a CSV or another type of file, flat file. Can you talk a little bit about connecting to BI? I think you can do it through a package, and maybe any other connections you can make, maybe to SPSS, or if that's on the potentially coming. Just talk about that for maybe a minute, and then I'll owe you a beer.
All right. Excuse me. Well, it's pretty easy. I can show you here what our sources look like. So I can pull data from file. As you saw me do with the drag and drop, it's hard to drag and drop a Cognos package, obviously, but a relational data source. but those are all available here. For Cognos data that you got, well-modeled, maybe it's in a great data warehouse, you don't want people dragging files around, you want them pointing at the enterprise source. And there are two ways that they can grab that data. They could either create a list report or have someone in IT just give them a list report, probably the same one that they might have been extracting into Excel to play with otherwise. Those big tabular data files. Create a list report that looks like that. You can pull that list report in. The other way is you don't even need a report. You can just point directly at the package, and we'll handle the creating the report part for you. You pick the columns that you want from that package, and we'll suck that data right out of BI and put that in Cognos Insight. You'll have to refresh it as it updates. You don't use relational query. You have to import data to get that kind of experience you just saw. So you'll have to refresh it on occasion when you want it, but it will pull data directly from any Cognos 10 package as old as, I want to say 10.1.1. You might want to check supported environments and not trust me on that, but we do import data from pretty much older versions of Cognos 10. And also SPSS statistics. You see that in the list here. This will allow you to build queries against your SPSS SAV files. If you've got predictive data out there, or simply descriptive statistics that are interesting to you that you want to pull in, feel free to do that as well. We support all of those sources. With TM1, I'll point out we do work a little bit differently. We're not pulling data in from TM1, we're connecting to it. It's a live connection. Because we use TM1 Insight as well. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, all of those sources we can import data from.
Unmuted.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The presentation was fantastic, and certainly can see some huge improvements from the original versions to now, and I'm sure it's only going to get better. So I really appreciate it. And yeah.
Wait, Trevor, we have another question. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. Leora asks, can the interactive dashboard, Cognos Insight, be accessed via an iPad as a data file without the need to connect to the data on the server?
No, it can't. So I'll explain how it might get there, but what I've created in Cognos Insight, no. What I would have to do is publish that to, first to TM1, so it's got a place to put the data. It's not going to find it on my laptop if I put it in Cognos 10. So I have to publish it to TM1, and then I have to use Cognos BI then to, for the most part, reauthor that or use Cognos Workspace on your iPad. What I've created here in Cognos Insight is just desktop application, Windows application. The other thing you could do is if when you publish that to TM1, although you won't see the same interactive dashboard, you can use that from your mobile device using TM1 Contributor as well. So if you wanted to create a contribution experience where I'm capturing information from other people, Contributor to do that.
Perfect.
Anything else?
I don't see any other questions. We're going to go ahead and take about a 10-minute break or so, and then we'll be back with the next presentation, which I believe is on SPSS.